Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's morning here on the East Coast in the United States, but it's afternoon where Byron is in the UK. Thank you so much for everybody that wanted to sign up for this event today. I know we have executives, presidents, co founders, founders, and lots of CEOs joining us today for this event. So, the goal is to add lots and lots of value to everyone and really help people that are CEOs and founders step into their role and be effective as a CEO. It's so important when you're leading an organization to really be effective in your role. And that's why I brought Byron on today. Again, the goal is to add lots and lots of value. So let us know to where you're joining us from. We love hearing from people from all over the world. So feel free to drop in the chat what state you're in or what country, and let us know where you're from. But Byron, I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time, so I'm really glad that we got connected today. You have two books that you've published. You're almost, ready for your third to come out in June. But you're the CEO expert. You speak the language. And I just want to kind of, get your thoughts on how do you become a really effective CEO? How would you give the audience some pointers and tips?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And it's one thing that I see a lot in the people that I work with because I come across a lot of founders who are fantastic at what they do. So they've started the business, they've come up with the idea, they've taken it to market. But a lot of the time, they're completely in over their head when it comes to growing a company. Because with every new level of success brings a new level of problems. When on top of focusing on growth, you have to lead and manage a team, you have to keep stakeholders happy, you have to overlook the operations. It's a huge amount to stack on top. And this is why I see so many first time CEOs, especially, just land up becoming overwhelmed by all of the challenges that come with their success. And that's why, for me, some of the biggest things that CEOs need to really come up with finding ways to manage is learning to defend their time. At the end of the day, what you don't do, as if you want to be an effective CEO, is just as important as what you do. You have to learn to delegate and trust the right people around you. You need to know when to set the right boundaries so that you can prioritize your focus on tasks that are going to take the business to the next level. The amount of CEOs I speak to who are completely stretched thin and stuck firefighting to the point that they don't have the time or bandwidth to focus on tasks that will take the business to the next level would amaze you. It's one of the biggest challenges I see. And then the third thing that I would add in is also learning how to deal with people because people think, oh, when you're a CEO, it's all about strategy and high impact work, where actually that's a very small part of the role. A lot of the time, it's going to be how do you navigate difficult conversations? How do you get people on the same page? All of the things that they don't teach you in business school. So for me, that's really where the focus comes in. It's how do you get someone to show up in what they're doing.
Wow. And you're so right. If you're constantly putting out fires and, being a firefighter, you're not effective. You're not being effective in your role. You've really got to have that 10,000-foot view, right? And not just be caught in the daily tasks and, the typical stuff. You have to have that higher level role, and you just can't be caught in the firefighting mind all the time. It's not effective. And then you are
Yeah.
spreading yourself so thin, aren't you?
Yeah. It's not only that, it's also when you're constantly in a reactive headspace, there's no way that you can make the right decisions or effectively lead. And this is where a lot of CEOs I work with become their own worst enemy. Because they are in this heightened state, they get stuck in their own head. So they overthink, they put off key decisions, they avoid what they know that they should be doing. So in many ways, they become the bottleneck in the business because when they're not showing up as the leader that the business needs, that's when it gets stuck. And their decision making, how they delegate, and everything else actually slows down growth. And this is why my favorite quote is your business's growth will never outgrow your inner growth. And I think that's such a powerful way of looking at it because a lot of the time, every new level of success is going to require a new level of you. But the CEOs who struggle to break through, they're the ones who don't focus on developing themselves. And that's really where I come in, the work that we do. Like, I'm not a business coach, so I don't get involved in the strategy or telling them how to run their business. It's not my place. My focus is putting it on them and how they're really showing up and navigating all of these problems.
Yeah, and you're so right on. Just speaking for myself, my leadership completely changed when I had a mindset shift. And it really does begin within. And when I assume that's a lot of the work that you're talking about that you do as well. It really does begin within. And so many times we think it's everything on the outside, right? But if we're not focusing from within and that inner growth that you just said, the company's growth is not gonna happen, right?
Exactly. And I see so many people trying to get caught up in the latest strategies and trends. But the reality is, you can give 100 people the exact same strategy, but they're all going to get different results. And what really separates those who succeed from those who don't is their mindset, because that determines how they take the strategy and the way that they implement it. So if you're not in the right headspace and you don't have the mindset needed to perform, you're never going to create the growth that you want. And this is why, even though it's not sexy and it's not the fun part of the business, you have to focus on developing your own skill set. And that starts with the way that you think, react, and behave. Because when you master your own mind, that's when you build momentum and you can move forward.
Yes. That is so powerful what you just said right there. And, I preach that all the time. So many people, they say, "Well, when I get here, I'll get a coach," right? "I just need to get here and then I'll get a coach," but you can't get there without one. And, if there's a reason why, Michael Jordan at the peak of his career had several coaches. And Tiger Woods, several coaches. The best have the best, right? You have to have those supporters around you that know the inner workings of how to be an effective CEO, for example, to really take you to that next level. Because we don't, our time on this earth is finite and it's non-renewable resource. So if you want to have the most positive impact on your organization and grow to the point of a business is to grow, let's face it, then you need that extra level, that some, support a lot of the times in order to take you there, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And I see this as well, where I'll speak to people and they'll be like, oh, when the timing's better, when we've got the budget, then I'll get the right help and support. But I love the sports analogy, because it's
Yeah.
the same as if you look at any team that's won championships, they didn't hire a coach when they got there. They hired a coach at the beginning because they knew that's how they were going to get their edge, because they needed that support to get them to where they wanted to be. And it's exactly the same in business. If you want to perform at the highest level, you have to surround yourself with the right mentors. And I'm also a believer that you need different mentors for different things. There's going to be people that you need help with strategy. There's going to be mentors you need help with mindset, with managing your team. It's so important that you recognize where your lag indicators are so that you can provide yourself with the right support. It's the same as if you look at presidents or country leaders, they've got a variety of people that they can turn to. And I also believe that's really important to have people external from the business. Because if you just have someone who's involved in the trenches with you, a lot of the time they're going to be too emotionally invested, or they're going to be biased based on what's going on. So you need someone who can help you step back and be like, okay, what's actually going on here? Who isn't attached to it, who can hold you to a higher standard, who isn't actually involved in a way that they want you to take a particular action. Because if you just get support and guidance from those closest to you, it's always going to be short sighted. So you've really got to
Absolutely.
look at, okay, guidance do you need here in order to get to that next level?
Yes, so right on. It's so important to have that third party perspective. And by the way, as we're talking, if anybody has any questions for Byron, drop them in the chat. Or if anything that he or I say resonate with you, let us know. And we will answer those questions as we go through. But what you said is so powerful. And I've been following your work for a long time. Um, you had a post, maybe it was over the summer, that really resonated with me. And it was a light bulb moment for me. And you may not even remember the post, but it was, talking about working out, being in shape, and how that energy that you get from that translates to your entire team. And it's almost like a butterfly effect as well. So, one, we have to have the mindset to be a CEO. You have to have a really proper mindset, but you also have to have a physical health, right? You have to develop your physical health. You can't expect your team to perform super high energy all the time if you're not, right?
Yeah. It's so interrelated. And
Yes.
this is why the work that I do with clients, it's very much looking holistically at their whole life. Because if you want to be a highly effective leader and CEO, starts with every other area of your life and how you're showing up. Because if you're not sleeping properly, if you're not eating right, if you're not exercising and looking after yourself, that's going to directly affect your energy and how you perform in meetings, pitches, how you deal with stress. So you have to look at all of the different areas of your life and how you get that under control. And that means that you have to start on a foundational level. You need to figure out what are the habits, the behaviors, the routines that you need to develop that help you feel at your best. Because you need to be able to bring your A game when it matters most. And that's never going to happen if you're burnt out and exhausted. But people overlook this. And it's so easy to do when you're running a business. Because when you're working 60+ hour weeks and you have so many priorities and commitments, your health often takes a back seat. It's the thing that you have the best intentions to do, but it's always the thing that you have to sacrifice first. And this is why it's really about figuring how do you find that harmony where you can prioritize the other areas of your life. It's the same as your relationships and really the things that matter most. Because if your family life is out of control and you're arguing with your partner, then that's something, the energy you're going to take into time with your team. And I speak to so many CEOs who have this inner battle because when they're at work, they're thinking about home. When they're at home, they're thinking about work. So they're never fully present. And that's why it's so important to find this approach where you can get all of these areas under control. Because if just one is off, it's going to affect your performance across the board.
I so agree with that. I so agree with that, Byron. It's so important to really approach your life from that holistic view where every single part of it matters and has an impact on the other. Um, our family life, our home life, our work life, it's all interrelated. Our health, our mental health, physical, and mental. So you have to have that holistic overall approach in order to be really effective in your role. And people feel that. Don't you feel it? Your team feels it if you're, coming to work and you're grumpy, or you're coming home and you're grumpy from work, and nobody's really getting the best version of you, are they? They're getting like a diluted version of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why, for me, self awareness is so important. I actually put up a post on this yesterday, but I just want to repeat it because I think it's really insightful for anyone listening. I'm a big advocate in you tracking what you're doing in your life and how you're showing up. And that means at least once a month, if not every week, you go through the key areas of your life with your energy, work life balance, relationships, productivity, focus, everything that matters to you, and rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. Get a clear idea of, okay, how are you currently feeling about this and at this stage in your life? And this is not about getting you to feel bad or beat yourself up about areas you're rating yourself low. But if you recognize, okay, there's something here that is a low number, maybe your work life balance, you put a 3 out of 10. Well, what are the correlating factors that are relating to? Is it affecting your energy, your focus, and everything else? And then how do you double down on fixing that? Because if you don't become aware of this, weeks, if not months or years are going to pass, and you're just going to keep neglecting it. I saw this with a client recently where when we went through these numbers, his energy was down, his productivity was down, his focus, and his relationship. And then we figured out that was because him and his wife, he wasn't home, he was disconnected, they were arguing a lot. So that was directly affecting everything else. He doubled down on focusing on his marriage, reconnected with his wife, and everything else went up. And that just goes back to everything in your life is related. But if you don't take this time to stop and audit it, you're not going to figure out what's actually weighing you down. And that's why that's such a simple practice you can do every week. Takes 30 seconds just to go through, just score yourself where you're at, and then know, okay, this is something that I'm lagging behind in. I need to focus on this for the next few weeks to bring it up. That's how you keep progressing and moving forward.
Absolutely. You've got to improve your relationships, right? Not just at work, but it starts at home. And that's, again, if everyone in your life is getting that diluted version of you, your team at work's not going to be operating to full efficiency. When you get home, your kids or your wife or your husband are not gonna, want to be around you because again, they're getting that diluted, grumpy version of you that's really ineffective. So it's a holistic approach, but it's that butterfly effect. It's the compound effect. The small little choices we make throughout the day a lot of the times have a huge impact. Um, and just improving a little bit and focusing on those areas a little bit, every day can really have a huge impact in, our performance overall.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
that's very
yeah.
profound, Byron. Very
Yeah.
profound.
I think you really hit the nail on the head there. And I see this is where a lot of people really mess up because they have this mentality that if they want to make change in their life, they have to overhaul everything. Whereas actually, it's small changes in different areas of your life that really give you an edge. And this goes back to being a highly effective CEO. You managing your time better doesn't mean you have to overhaul everything, but you do need to get intentional with, let's say, for instance, if all of your meetings run over and then you're always feeling like you're behind, you need to set better expectations for how much time you have available and then know when to cut it off. If people keep disrupting you so you don't focus on work, you have to set the right boundaries so that you can prioritize high value work. You need to focus on the little things like planning your day, really figuring out what are your key priorities.
Yeah.
All of these things compounded are going to be an absolute game changer. But people overcomplicate it. They try and think, oh, I need to make these huge, massive shifts. And it's just no, make these small incremental changes and added together, it's going to completely transform what you're doing.
Absolutely. I'm a huge believer in the compound effect. And it's about the small shifts, that you and those small changes, those small impacts that you make every day. And what's the saying? If you improve 1% every day at the end of the year, so 365 days, you're 37 times improved, right? So just imagine, at the end of next year being 37 times more impactful, 37 times more better of a leader, better of a husband, father, a wife, a mother, 37 times better. And it really does start with those small, impactful changes that you can make. But first, you have to have the awareness.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
that's pretty key, right?
Uh, well, I think that again comes back to knowing where you're putting your focus and time. And one thing I'd share to anyone listening to this is the importance of auditing what you're doing, because I'll regularly work with clients who come to me saying that time is their biggest barrier. There's not enough minutes in the day to get things done, and they're all over the place. And then when we break down what's happening, time isn't actually the problem. The problem is they're not making the best use of the time. They're getting pulled into busy work, tasks that they shouldn't be done by them, putting out issues that they shouldn't even be involved in. And this is why I'll have conversations with clients and we'll audit what they're doing and we'll regularly be able to remove over 50% of their priorities. And anyone listening to this can do it themselves. Just create a list of what are your key tasks that you need to get done, and then go through and just ask yourself, is this actually important? If the answer is no, remove it. If the answer is yes, does it need to be done by you or could it be done by someone else? Because the more you start delegating and freeing yourself up, the more you're going to then have the bandwidth to focus on what matters. But people don't do this. And this is why I say to my clients, do this every single week before you start planning your week. When you've got a to-do list, look at it and be like, okay, what can I hand off? Because there'll be tasks that you'll be doing on autopilot without even thinking about it. And yes, it's important, but it doesn't mean it needs to be done by you. And the more you can free yourself up, the better you're going to be able to show up in what matters.
Yes. Delegation, there's so much power in it. And it is hard, but it's one of the absolute best things that you can do. And your team, that's what they're counting on. They want to be led by you. They want to learn. And it's okay if they make mistakes. What's not okay is if you burn your candle from both ends and have nothing left to give. Because those tasks that you don't want to give up and delegate, guess what? If you're not doing them, or if you are doing them, you're doing them with less efficiency because you don't have the energy.
Yeah,
There's only so much you can put into everything with and get just little resolve, really. You know,
yeah.
it's
I think the
important.
really interesting thing of that is also knowing when you're pushing yourself too hard.
Yeah.
Because when you're running a business, it's really easy to just be stuck in a mentality of, I've got so much to do, I need to cram more in. But unfortunately, our focus has diminishing returns. So after a while, something that could take 20 minutes takes 2 hours. Like I'm sure you've had it yourself, where you're
Yeah.
sat there reading something, you get through a paragraph, and you're like, "What did I just read?" And you have to go do this multiple times. Like I, and it's just having that awareness of knowing, okay, I need to step away. Because yes, I could push through this and get it done, but that doesn't mean that I should, because it's just going to burn me out further. So it's about knowing when to set a boundary with yourself and being like, okay, I've done everything I can. I need to come back to this later and step away. This is always going to be stuff to do. If if you reach a point where you've got on top of everything, it's you're probably just overlooking stuff or just settled and just not growing. So there's always going to be stuff that needs your attention. And if you keep chasing having everything completed, you're just setting yourself up to fail. So it's a really fine line and a big balance. It's difficult to achieve. And it comes back to what you said of self awareness. You have to know, okay, what am I doing? What needs my attention? And when do I need to step back?
Yes. So self-awareness, step number 1. And then you have to have the mindset. You have to get your mindset right. Being a CEO is hard. It's definitely not easy. That there's a reason why there's lots of failed businesses out there, right? Lots of CEOs that get burnt out, that get stressed, that can't do it anymore. It's a very hard role to be in, but it doesn't have to be. So the perception is that it's super hard, and it has its challenges. But when you delegate tasks properly, when you train your team properly, when you lead um, with effectiveness instead of reactivity, guess what? It's actually a lot better, and it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be to the point where you're firefighting and reacting all the time. And if you feel like you are in a role that you are reactive, then it's time to take a step back and, come into some self awareness, develop a mindset really for growth. Because honestly, if you're putting out fires all the time, you're not going to accomplish the goals. And then your business won't grow as a result. Your team won't grow as a result, you won't grow as a result, and it's only going to leave stress on family, friends, and relatives at the end of the day. So you don't want to do that, do you?
You know, I think the really key takeaway here, and that I think everyone needs to focus on more of, is slowing down.
Yeah.
Because when you're in a high pressure position, it's a constant need to push forward. I need to get things done. I need to solve these problems. But that's why you're in that reactive headspace. And that's why one of the biggest shifts that I try and implement to my clients is forcing them, instead of reacting, to slow down and process what's going on. You have to figure out, okay, what's actually going on here? What's the challenge? How do I deal with this? What do I need to do from here? Because when you're just trying to push forward, you overlook all of those opportunities and how to deal with it effectively. So it's really about becoming better at processing problems, because that's how you're going to feel in control. Because the majority of the time when I speak to someone who tells me that they're overwhelmed, they're actually underplanned, because they haven't taken the time to slow down and figure out what they're actually doing. Like, you'd be amazed at how many CEOs I speak to who, beyond having a rough idea for what needs to get done, they don't plan their days. And I don't mean meticulously mapping out every 30 minutes. I mean having a clear intention of, these are the key things I need to get done, and then knowing how to defend that time accordingly. Because they don't have that in place, that's where they just get pulled into fires or busy work. And as a result, they just feel stuck in the trenches. So it's all about getting highly intentional with what you're doing, which comes from proper planning, having a clear game plan of, okay, this is what I need to do and how I'm going to move things forward, which is difficult to come up with when you're just focusing on immediate problems. And this is where I said this earlier, but I'll say it again. Most CEOs I work with are their own biggest enemies, because they're just focusing on trying to get things done or challenges directly in front of them that are coming at the expense of the bigger picture and what they're trying to get done.
Yes, that is so true. Start a day with a plan and stick to it. It's all about consistency. I know that's worked for me. Consistency really is key. It doesn't matter what it is. So, consistency with working out, consistency with eating healthy, consistency with setting up your day, knowing what's in front of you, right? That does prevent so many of these reactive situations. And then having a boundary in place so that your time is not wasted and so that you don't get pulled into these fires. you have to have those boundaries there, don't you? But how do you set them up?
Yeah.
Because that is that is something that is not easy. That's one of those easier said than done things. So how would you recommend
Yeah.
setting up a firm boundary?
Yeah. People aren't going to like hearing this because it's not comfortable. But the way you set a boundary is you face the conversation. You have to just go and say and set a new expectation. I had this talk with one of my clients recently where he just has people constantly coming into his office and they're disrupting him, so taking his focus away, so he wasn't getting much done. So for him, he had to communicate to his team that during certain hours he would be unavailable unless the building's on fire. He isn't to be disturbed because he's focusing on high value top end strategy. Or another case for him as well is closing his door when he doesn't want to get disturbed because that stops people from just coming in. The other way to set the boundaries is also knowing what you want, because if you aren't aware of how people are overstepping it, again, you're not going to be able to speak up properly. So you need clarity on what's happening. You need to figure out what's the outcome that you want, and then you have to communicate it. So that's one side of it. But the biggest side of boundary challenges I see in CEOs is with themselves because they overstep. They're like, oh, I can cram more in, I can keep pushing, I can just take on more. I've got a few clients in particular who their biggest like setbacks are they overload themselves. They just think, oh, I can get all of this done. So they just take on more and more, and that just stretches them thin. So you have to know, okay, these are the key priorities in my life, and this is how I need to defend it. And you need to be strict with yourself, knowing when to step away. I talk about this in my book, The Effective CEO, when it comes to work-life balance. And the reason why most people can't achieve it is they hope for the best. They're like, oh, hopefully today I'm going to get to the gym, or hope they'll finish on time and I can have dinner with the family. Hope, however, is not a strategy, and you're just setting yourself up to fail. And that's why the way I always advise people to do it is to flip it on its head. Figure out first what are the key things in your life that are most important to you. Time to work out, date night with your partner, dinner with the kids, and then that gets scheduled first. Once you have that in place, then build the rest of your life around that. But then to take it up a level, you have to be highly intentional with what you schedule around that. Because let's say you say to your partner that you're going to have date night and go out for dinner at 6 p.m. Well, the worst thing you could do is schedule a highly intense board meeting directly before that. Because not only does it run the risk that's going to overrun and you'll then have to cancel, but also you're going to be mentally wired and stressed. So you're not going to be present for the dinner. So you have to be more intentional of what you schedule before that. And then you also need to be strict with yourself and treat that event the same as you would as a meeting with your most important client. That unless things are falling apart and need your attention, you don't cancel. So you raise your own standards and expectations, and that's how you find harmony. So it's really flipping it on its head and just getting highly intentional with the life you want to live.
I think that is so important what you just said. You have to engineer the life you want to live. And so many people, especially entrepreneurs, we start a business and, most of the time it's for free, with the intention of I want to have freedom. I want to have my own schedule. I want to do things my own way. And then what happens? Well, we take all the freedom away from ourselves and, intentionally or unintentionally by creating this life that is revolved around work and with meetings and with everything that, it's important, but then we, negate the family and, that it's, you have to put your priorities in order and schedule around accordingly. But what you just said right there, having a really big important meeting right before you have a date night with your spouse, probably not the best idea, right? Your mindset is not going to be on that event with your spouse. You're going to be thinking about that board meeting. So, it's really, you have to have an intentional schedule and stick to it
Yeah,
and, make sure your priorities are in line. That's so important, Byron.
yeah. That again goes back to proper planning, though.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, so many people overcomplicate it and they're looking for the latest tools and hacks and trends. It's like, no, you need to focus on the foundations and the basics. And one interesting thing that you said before was consistency. And one thing that I do with my clients, and this is again, anyone listening to this could replicate themselves, is once we've worked together for a while, we figure out the habits, the behaviors, the routines, everything that makes them feel at their best. And when we get them to a point of high performance, as in they're feeling great, they're high energy, they're in a state of flow, we then create what I call a high performance checklist. So these are the key things that they're following through with at that period that are allowing them to feel that way. And the reason why this is so important is, firstly, when you go into your planning for the week, you can make sure, okay, have I made time to do all of these things? But also, if there's a period in time, because it will happen, where you'll start feeling run down, you'll feel stuck, you're not performing at the level that you want to, rather than trying to figure out what's missing, you can just go back to that list and be like, what have I been neglecting? What am I not doing? And it could be a case of maybe you've been working late. Maybe you haven't been following through with your morning routine or meditating or going for that lunchtime walk. What are the things that when you were performing at your best, you were doing that you're not doing now? And then you can know immediately what to fix. And that's such a powerful tool. That's just keeping a very clear eye of, okay, these are the things that really work for you. But the thing I want to really make clear there is it's what works for you, because everyone's different. So what makes you feel good isn't may not make me feel good. And a lot of people again get into trouble because they look at all these gurus and all of these people are highly successful and they're like, oh, if that's what they're doing, I should do the same thing. Yes, you can take inspiration from it, but all of us are different. We've got different priorities, commitments, different sleep schedules, all of these things. So you have to build it around you because it has to be sustainable.
Yes, so right on. Gosh, so much wisdom here. And I really hope that everyone that tuned in today has some takeaways, right? But Byron is the absolute expert when it comes to this. And, he's written more than one book on the subject. So, he is somebody to go to if you're struggling, if you're sleep deprived, if you are stressed out, if your team is not performing, if you feel like you are really burning your candle at both ends and constantly being reactive, you might need to see somebody that can help you take you to that next level. What you don't want is your company to diminish and shrink, your team to leave, or your marriage to, not be successful because of your mindset, your schedule, a boundary setting issue that you may have. So it's important to, sometimes work with a coach like Byron, but read his books. They're very insightful. He speaks the language of CEOs. He knows this topic very well. And I hope everyone, got some value add with this talk. Any closing thoughts, Byron?
No, I think we've covered a lot here. Like the advice I'll give to anyone is just go back through this and pick out the key points that you think, okay, where am I maybe lagging behind right now? And how can I start implementing this? There's been a lot of tools and resources and other things I've thrown in here. So the key thing I would say to everyone is just go and implement it, because knowing you need to do something and actually doing it are completely different things. So
Yes.
yeah, if you do want to dive further into any of this, I do have two books, one called The Effective CEO and the other one called CEO in Control. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll happily send you a free copy if anyone's listening to this wants to check them out. So, yeah, just happy to share more resources and help any way I can.
Perfect. Yes, hit Byron up, connect with him on LinkedIn. And maybe once the talk is over, we can put your information in the comments so people can reach out to you, Byron. But thank you so much for your time. I know you're a really busy guy. I appreciate you coming on today and imparting your wisdom, and
Mm.
helping the audience and really adding value. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. And again, let us know, if you're watching this on replay, what you learned from something that Byron said today and how it will impact you as a leader. Because we want to know that what we're saying is helping people. That's the goal. So thank you so much for everyone who tuned in today. Byron, I appreciate your help. Thank you so much.
Thank you.